Hi, and welcome to the show. Rate and review at kevinmd.com/rate. Subscribe at kevinmd.com/podcast. Today on the show, we have Brian Boxer Wachler. He's an ophthalmologist, and he's the author of the book, Influenced, The Impact of Social Media on Our Perception. Brian, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Kevin, very much for having me. Appreciate being here.
So we'll get into your book in a little bit, but first off, briefly share your story and journey to where you are today.
I'm an ophthalmologist, and I ended up going to medical school nearby you up in New Hampshire. And I am originally from Los Angeles and realized after a few winters of scraping my windshield, it's probably better that I came back to where I grew up out here.
All right. So ophthalmology. So tell us, what's a typical day like for you? What are some typical cases that you would see?
My specialty is keratoconus, where the cornea, the outer lens of the eye, bulges out like a hernia. And I was trained as a cornea transplant surgeon as well as a vision correction surgeon, LASIK, back 25 years ago. So I pioneered these procedures that can prevent people from having cornea transplants, one of them primarily being non-invasive or epi-on cross-linking. So this is actually our 20-year anniversary since I first developed that procedure. And it was named after Stephen Holcomb, who was the bobsledder who won a gold medal at the Olympics. So I do a lot of keratoconus treatments, including Intacs as well, which are little micro inserts that we implant in about 7 minutes under the cornea. And that helps to reshape the cornea too. So typically when I'm doing procedures, there'll be Intacs, Holcomb C3R, cross-linking, and then CK. And also implants for correcting vision like Visi and ICL, which is a lens that we implant as opposed to LASIK for people that aren't good LASIK candidates too.
All right. So just give us a brief scope. What's the state of ophthalmology today? For those medical students looking at different career paths, what are some questions they need to ask themselves or things to think about if they're going to consider ophthalmology as a possibility?
I'll never forget one of my professors up there at Dartmouth when I was in med school and I was expressing interest in ophthalmology. And he said one thing about ophthalmology that he really appreciates is that it's a perfect marriage between medical treatment and surgical treatment of patients. And I would agree with that. So for anyone who's considering ophthalmology, if you like not just medical, but also surgical and like that balance, that's also a good field for that as well. And there's a lot of technology always being evolved. So like when we're doing cataract surgery, we have these lenses now where we replace the cataract lens with an implant, and it's essentially a trifocal lens that helps people not just restore their distance vision, but also their computer and their reading vision too. So that's just an example. The technology is always evolving in the field. It's a pretty heavy technology field.
All right. So let's talk about your book. It's titled Influence, The Impact of Social Media on Our Perception. So tell us the background. How did this book come together?
Well, Kevin, I wrote that book as a 911 call to action for people because I'm a Beverly Hills keratoconus eye surgeon, and I have 3.5 million followers on social media, and I have a flaw. I easily myself became addicted to social media. So if this can happen to me, then it's very likely a lot of people listening right now or their children can also become addicted. And that's why I took it upon myself to be transparent about my experience and do the research to show people the tips and the tricks to avoid the problems that I had. And especially for parents, and I'm a parent too, teen daughters who ironically got me into social media, TikTok in particular, during the pandemic. I know for parents, they feel a lot of times like they've lost their children to their phones because these platforms are designed to be addictive.
So tell us more about your own story. You said that you were primarily on TikTok, 3.5 million followers, and tell us a little bit about that story and how you got quote unquote addicted to that.
It was during the pandemic and I had a lot of unaccustomed downtime, and my daughters were 14 at the time, and they said, "Dad, there are some really good doctors on TikTok and we can get you started. We think you'd be really good." So I was like, okay, sure. Not a lot of other things to do aside from Netflix at the time. So I started finding my niche, which was calling out viral videos with health trends that were completely bogus, like not true information. And millions of people were watching these videos relying on totally false information. So I started duetting them, as it's called, a side-by-side video. And I used the Gen Z lingo at the time, mostly Gen Z was on there. Now a lot of adults are on TikTok too. And I would call it CAP, CAP, which is Gen Z for not true. And I eventually developed this little shtick where I had a blue hat and it said cap in the front. And at the end of the video, I'd either put the hat on or not put it on so that people would watch to the very end to see. And it was a huge need that was being filled because the algorithms, when they promote a video to be viral, it has nothing to do with being accurate or not. So there's almost like, the wild, wild west out there in social media. And that is where I really grew my platform. But I would wake up and I'd have 20,000, 50,000 new followers in the morning. And that's an incredible dopamine rush.
Yeah.
And that's the same behavior that becomes addictive for other things like gambling and sex and drugs. And that's eventually what led me to literally become addicted to TikTok there for about a good 6 months.
So when you woke up and you got, say, 10, 20, 30,000 new followers, which is a huge amount, and I could only imagine what that dopamine rush would be. So tell me, how did that affect your mindset? How would it affect your personal life, professional life? What would you do waking up and having that type of influence?
I mean, it was just wanting more and more because at that stage I was putting these goals on myself to, okay, I want to hit 1 million followers. I want to hit 2 million followers. So I became obsessed. And it really started to interfere with my personal life, with my family in particular, to the point that I'd come home and I'd be working on my device, checking for DMs or responding to comments or researching new content, or even just refreshing the screen to see how many more views I got, right? Just to aggrandize my ego. But here are my twin daughters trying to tell me about their day, and I've got one ear in their conversation, and that wasn't even really listening. And it just got to the point, well, and by the way, for teenagers to even want to tell their parents about their day is already a rarity, right? So I was missing out on a lot of really important family time to the degree that even taking them to a volleyball tournament, I snuck away once to do a TikTok live, and I got busted because at lunch, their friends saw me, because their friends follow me, doing a TikTok live, and told my girls. And of course they were incredibly pissed off and upset because I snuck away to, do social media again. So it really became that strain developing with my kids in the relationship.
So what happened next? How did you realize that, hey, I need to make a change?
In fact, I didn't even realize it. It was my daughters and my wife having literally a TikTok sit down intervention with me where they explained what was happening. And at the time, I was in complete denial. I felt like, how dare you attack the success I've had? Are you jealous? You got me started with this. So in fact, I doubled down, showing them to even grow my platform more. And so it didn't work. And the only thing that happened that really was key is one of my videos got taken down by TikTok. It was deemed to have violated a community guideline of theirs. And so my whole platform was suppressed. It wasn't removed, but it was suppressed for about 2 weeks. So I couldn't get any of my videos to go viral as hard as I tried. It's like in psychology called learned helplessness. And you just finally give up for those 2 weeks. And I had that aha moment of then realizing when I was kind of going through withdrawals of what I'd been doing and the strain it put on my kids and the relationship. And I felt awful. I remember going to the bedroom and just tearing up because feeling guilty of what I've done and how much I've missed too, right? I mean, so many family experiences I was zoned out on because I was so focused and obsessed with my device and social media and TikTok in particular. And since then, it's been a really good, healthy balance. I've taken the pressure off myself to grow my platform. So, I'm good with how many followers I have. I don't have to keep growing. And I still do a couple times a week TikTok, but not like before.
So you told your story, of course, in your book. So tell us some of the main messages that you want readers to come away with.
Well, first of all, to understand that the apps, the platforms are designed to get as much of our time as possible and to be as addictive as possible. It's like gambling. So every time you push the button and you hit the slot machine, it's a random outcome if you're going to win or not. And that's the same mechanism when you're scrolling up on those videos. You just don't know what's going to happen next. And that's designed to be like that on purpose. So recognize that. And then also set limits on your social media. because a lot of times people are scrolling and they don't have any idea they've spent like an hour or two. They've just flown by, and that can also be a factor. So you can set limits on the phone for the apps, and ask people if you are getting a little bit out of control with it. Ask other people's feedback too for that as well. In fact, in the book, there's a whole chapter called Living with Social Media, where I go into a lot of these tips and tricks to show people how to manage it for themselves, but also for parents, for their kids, because kids are really challenged. Imagine if adults are challenged, right?
Mhm.
And
Yeah.
myself as an example, kids where their brain, their frontal cortex hasn't fully developed yet. And so they don't have those self-regulation skills that adults have. So they're much more susceptible and have a much harder time regulating.
So one of the things that you mentioned earlier was that there's a lot of misinformation on social media, especially in platforms like TikTok. And I think that your initial goal absolutely was noble. I do think that we have to have more physicians go online and duet and really call out misinformation that's online, because if we don't do it, that misinformation is just going to go unchallenged and influence so many others. Now,
Mhm.
how do they strike a balance between doing that versus going too far and letting that consume them?
I think if you're going to do it, and I think that's a great call to action that you have, is for physicians to go on to the platform. TikTok in particular is where there's a lot of that going on, and just try it, kick around and see how it works for duetting. Or what's also another popular mechanism is you do a little clip after somebody's played a
Hmm.
video as well. And you just don't want it to start interfering and becoming obsessive about it. So if you find yourself right when you wake up in the morning checking your phone, or right before you go to bed checking your phone for social media and the activity and what you're missing out on, FOMO, right? Fear of missing
Yeah.
out. That's a red flag that can help you understand, maybe you have to sort of back off a little bit and set some boundaries for yourself. Those are some of the things we talk about in the book, Influenced, as well.
Now, if you were to start this social media journey all over again, now, needless to say, I think there was some good by calling out that, but obviously there were some negatives as well. What would you have done differently?
Oh, that's a great question. I think asking feedback early on from my family if they saw behavior that was concerning and I was starting to be neglectful as a parent, that would have been helpful. And they very well may have. I just may not have listened, again, because when you have somebody who's addicted to anything, a lot of times being rational with them is a challenge, right? Imagine if somebody's addicted to drugs
Hmm.
or addicted to sex or gambling. It's usually taking a multimodal approach to get them through it. And sometimes just a conversation isn't enough.
Now, was it just TikTok for you? What about other social media platforms like YouTube, Facebook, Twitter, things like that?
Yeah, at the time, I really wasn't focused on the others. I was posting a little bit, but I saw the most rapid growth
Yeah.
on TikTok. So it's like being at that one slot machine in the casino out of all the slots, and that's the one that's paying off the big jackpots. That was like TikTok.
Now, what is it about TikTok specifically that makes it so addictive? Because yes, other social media platforms can be addictive, but not to the extent of TikTok. TikTok is almost like crack, right? So, specifically, having lived through that, what specifically about TikTok makes it so addictive when compared to other social media platforms?
They really pioneered the short form video content format. So YouTube is always typically long form, meaning the videos are longer, 10 minutes or 20 minutes. So TikTok really pioneered the short clips, less than a minute long, and the vertical scroll. And that's why you've now seen Instagram copy it with reels, and you've seen YouTube copy it with shorts.
Hmm.
So it's that vertical scroll, short form content, and that's what's mimicking the slot machine effect, particularly the unpredictability of the video. And some people get duds and some people get really good ones, and it's that unpredictable nature which forces people to keep going.
We're talking to Brian Boxer Wachler. He's an ophthalmologist, and his book is titled Influenced: The Impact of Social Media on Our Perception. So, Brian, when you talk to other physicians, other clinicians about whether they should go on social media, or if they ask you, hey, Brian, should I go on social media or not? What do you tell them now?
I think it's a good idea, especially for parents, because one thing that studies have shown is that parents who want to try to regulate and have an impact on their children's behavior on the platforms, if they are on the platforms, and sometimes the thought of a parent joining TikTok gets their blood pressure going and beads of sweat on their forehead. But the reality is, if you go and just kick the tires and see what it's about and not create content, but just understand it, then you can sit down with your child and say, let's look at your app, let's look at your account, see who you're following, because not all influencers are dispelling good influence. And when the child knows the parent understands TikTok because they have an account, that gives them credibility. And that therefore has been shown through studies to help modulate their activity versus parents who've never been on it and just say, you got to do this or do this with your social media. It's hard for kids to really take that seriously. But for doctors, physicians, healthcare providers that want to be a part of social media and help sort of participate in the wild, wild west aspect of the videos and calling out videos that are not true, or on the flip side, endorsing ones and improving them that are true, is definitely take a look at it. I would encourage you to do that, because you're going to be providing a community service for the public in that respect. And you may even really enjoy it. In my book, Influence, there's a whole chapter at the very end to help people responsibly grow their platform. And even if they want to be influencers, the chapter is called So You Want to Be an Influencer. And it's not just my insights and pearls, but I interviewed 15 other highly respected, successful influencers, many of them also doctors, about their insights too, and the good and the bad, and how to grow their platform, and some of those tricks too that I interviewed them. And they were very open about their experience in a completely transparent way, which was really appreciated and rare. Makes it a great chapter for that purpose too.
Now, when you called out misinformation or inaccurate medical information on TikTok in general, did you feel like you made a difference? Did you feel like you moved the needle when you did that?
I really did. I really felt like I was having an impact, because I would see comments for people saying, thank you so much, or I was going to buy this, or I was going to try this. And I really felt like I was having a much broader reach. I mean, I love practicing ophthalmology. I love treating keratoconus and helping people with the other conditions that we talked about. But this was allowing me even to reach more people, hundreds of thousands or millions of people regularly, to help save them at the very least from doing something that was going to waste their time and have no effect, or at the most prevent them from hurting themselves or harming themselves that even could be fatal, because there's definitely viral trends that have led to people dying for trying things that they really shouldn't have, because critical thinking a lot of times is checked out now with people. And that's why these videos have such an effect on the viewers oftentimes. But also doctors and healthcare providers can endorse good content that's accurate too, and that can also help people in that respect too.
And my final question: what are some of your take-home messages that you want to leave with the KevinMD audience?
So these are some of the tips that I talk about in the book Influenced. Is number one, when you're at the dinner table or you're out for dinner, don't have your phone with you, or keep it away. Personally, when I go for dinner, I don't even bring my phone with me, because you want to focus on having real conversations like you used to have before we had social media. And as human beings, that's what we need. We need those real social interactions with people. Even if it's over Zoom, it's still a real interaction versus just, messages going back and forth. Number two is, don't check your phone right before you go to bed, and don't check it right when you wake up in the morning. And number three, set time limits if you feel you need to. The apps do allow you to have the apps shut down after, let's say, 20 or 30 minutes, whatever you want to set on them. And there's many other tips in that chapter, living with social media, but those are some key ones.
And how can people reach you or find your book?
So people can get the book on Amazon or Barnes and Noble. It's in all the bookstores. I was really honored. It was recently featured in the Harvard Business Review. So that really made a boost to it being available everywhere. And it's also on Audible. So for people that like to listen to books, I actually read it in the studio. So as the author reading the book, I felt like it was an extra special experience for people who like to listen to books on Audible.
Once again, the book is Influence, the Impact of Social Media on Our Perception. Brian, thank you so much for sharing your story time and insight. Thanks again for being on the show.
It's a pleasure. Thanks for having me, Kevin.